So your worst nightmare has come true and your child might need surgery for craniosynostosis. Not to worry, this video is to set your mind at ease that it is actually not the end of the world. Hi, I'm Ellie. I'm a mom of two and under, and my younger daughter was diagnosed with craniosynostosis a little over a year ago now, and it is just about, well, it's over the year mark since her surgery. This video will be all about our story and how we ended up getting to her diagnosis, as well as the process of the surgery and just things that brought me comfort when we were going through this situation a year ago. We'll also go over post-op stuff, things that happened after, including the helmet, and moving forward, what will be happening. So let's go ahead and dive on in and start with how we ended up with the diagnosis. With our daughter, because it was Metopic Craniosynostosis, it means that the forehead was triangulated. It's also known as triangulocephaly. And I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but it's just means that the skull is not shaped right. That's what the cephaly is, because plagiocephaly is when there's a misshapenness in usually the back of the head. It's a positional situation. Usually with craniosynostosis, you can tell as soon as the child is born that something is amiss with the skull. For our daughter, it was, I guess, not enough that we realized it until she was about 2 months old. When we went to her 2-month checkup, we brought it up with the pediatrician and he said, okay, I'm going to give you a referral to get some imaging done. So we were given a referral to get an ultrasound for some reason at the hospital in network with our pediatrician. I still don't know why they did an ultrasound. It came back clean, but they were like, you need to do a CT scan of her head. And I was like, why? Ultrasound came back clean, but I was still in denial that something would need to be done about this triangulation going on in my daughter's forehead. I was like, my daughter's perfect how she is. And I was in denial of the potential problems that could arise from not taking care of it and would arise from not taking care of it. So we went in to do a CT scan, and that one obviously came back with, her forehead suture was fused. And so when that was given to our pediatrician, the pediatrician's office called us and gave us a referral to a pediatric neurosurgeon and plastic surgeon in the same hospital. Like, they worked together a lot on these kinds of surgeries and other surgeries. My issue was it was about 3.5 hours away, and while we did have family in that area, I didn't really want to travel that far, and I was worried about follow-up visits and things like that. So we ended up taking her to a plastic surgeon who ended up being like a jaw, and lower facial plastic surgeon. He took care of like tongue ties and lip ties more than anything else. He was like, I'm not equipped to be able to handle a forehead surgery that is of this caliber, I guess. And I don't do anything like that. I'm more of a mouth person. And it was just a consult. There was a good thing and a bad thing about taking her to this, I'm going to say second opinion, even though it was technically our first opinion. It was just, I was again still in denial that anything was wrong. So when I went in to this consult, because my husband stayed with our older daughter at home and I took our younger daughter to this consult, and the good thing about it was he was able to show me the CT scan and show me exactly where her forehead was basically entirely fused and had like a little hairline crack, like up higher, closer to her soft spot. He was like, this suture should be open still, at least a little bit. Like, she's of an age where it might be starting to close, but it should not be completely closed. And he was like, that needs to be opened up in some way, and you would need a surgeon to do that. Your daughter is going to have surgery, or you could have these things happen. And so that was good. That was very good. And the bad thing I'm going to say is that he kind of fear-mongered a little bit when it came to the surgeons that we were originally referred to. And I hate to say this about any doctor. All doctors are entitled to their own opinion, and you should definitely listen to your doctors, but the thing is, our daughter's pediatrician had referred us to this other doctor, and I had gone out of my way to search for this other doctor who then said that these other ones were. Anyway, point is, he fearmongered a little bit. He was like, they don't take care of lip and tongue ties very well. And I was like, what do you mean? She doesn't have a lip or tongue tie, so why are we talking about a lip and tongue tie? He's like, that's what I have experience with. I was like, then why are we talking about her potential issues? Or like, anyway, so it ended up being that we went and did a consultation with the original neurosurgeon and plastic surgeon that we were referred to, and they were great. It turned out, like, we did a little bit of research before we went to the consultation as well. And of course, their whole job is to put you at ease. So a lot of the stuff that I'm sharing, or that I will share, was shared with us in the consultation, as well as things that actually happened for us that I found comforting, I will be sharing in this video. So with this consultation with the neurosurgeon and plastic surgeon, we found out that the neurosurgeon was actually one of the ones that pioneered this particular surgery that our daughter was going to be having. I was like, well, why in the world did I ever doubt? Like, why did I listen to this guy who's not even in this particular niche of this field? Anyway, so just be careful who you listen to. It is not the end of the world, I promise. And as long as you trust your pediatrician, they will refer you to the correct person in your area. I promise. I promise. They will. Our pediatrician ended up referring us to another person that was super, super like life-saving as well, but life-saving in the sense that I didn't have to drag two toddlers an hour and a half every 3 weeks. But anyway, we'll get into that in a little bit. So with this consultation though, with the 3.5 hours away and with this neurosurgeon and plastic surgeon, the neurosurgeon was like, I am on vacation next week, and this really should have been done last week, because she was a little over 3 months old at that point. I mentioned we figured it out, like we started having suspicions at about 2 months. Well, the imaging and stuff dragged on for an eternity. When it came to this particular issue, it's better to get it fixed as close to 3 months as possible, because 3 months is about when you can go under anesthesia more safely, and it's definitely an anesthesia procedure. So anyway, we were like, okay, well, we'll come back in 2 weeks then. He was like, yeah, let's get you on the schedule in 2 weeks. And so they did. They got us on the schedule in 2 weeks. So now we'll move on to the surgery portion of this video. And I'm going to go into a little bit of detail, mostly about how I was feeling and the things that comforted me. But I will also share like some of the fears that I had with this situation and things. So if that triggers you, just beware, and hopefully it doesn't trigger you. If you feel like you need to skip it, go ahead. I'll put a caution sign in the corner here when I'm talking about things that might be a little bit triggering or just not as helpful to hear. Even though admitting that those feelings are valid could definitely help. So maybe you can go back and watch those things after your kid or your child has gone through the surgery. It might actually be helpful to do that. But anyway, so we had to arrive in the area a day before the actual surgery, because the surgery was early in the morning, 1, and 2, they needed to take blood and give her, I think they gave her like an antibiotic or something. I should have clarified this with my husband, because he was the one that actually took her to do the things, so he had to ask for it and things. It might have been a strep test. I really don't remember exactly what it was that we had to do, but there was some kind of like nose swab or something that they did after her blood was taken, but before the surgery. Anyway, so those things were done, and we went to our Airbnb that we had for like 4 nights, I think is what we had it for, because we had the day before, and then my husband and older daughter were staying at the Airbnb while I stayed in the hospital with my younger daughter. The girls thankfully slept well, as I recall, but I know I didn't. I slept better than I expected, but I still didn't sleep great. I had to wake up early in the morning because, again, surgery was early in the morning, and we needed to be there like an hour and a half or 2 hours before the surgery was even scheduled to begin. So all of that being said, it ended up being, so we dropped off our older daughter with the family that was in the area, like I mentioned, and we got there probably 6 in the morning or something like that, an hour and a half before the surgery was supposed to start at like 7:30. And during the check-in process, they did another like mini consultation with us, and we saw both the surgeons as well as the anesthesiologist, and I believe one other person. I think we saw like one of the lead nurses or residents, and their sole purpose, or at least what they told us, their sole purpose was to make sure that our daughter was going to be safe. And that could have been the anesthesiologist as well that said that. But like their job is to make sure that she's safe. And like all doctors, all ethical doctors, they're trying to keep your kid safe. They're not going to do anything that will harm your child. Oh, I almost forgot. So when you're under anesthesia, you're not supposed to eat for a certain amount of time beforehand. That applies to little ones as well. I can't remember how long it was that we weren't allowed to feed her, but it wasn't the full like 12 hours that you typically have for pre-anesthesia or pre-blood work or anything like that. I think it was like 3 or 4 hours that we weren't supposed to feed her beforehand. So I believe when we got up at like 5 a.m., we fed her, as I recall, and just really quickly. And yeah, actually, I think we had our alarm set for 4 or 4:30 so we could feed her. And then we like fully woke up at like 5:30 and got everything rolling because there was a lot of travel that we needed to do, both to drop off our older daughter and then to get to the hospital. So after all that happened, we were brought to where the waiting area would be for us to wait for the surgery to be done and to receive news of that. There was a really nice receptionist in that room, and she gave us name tags and was like, okay, so like this is a child that belongs to you, basically. And she also was able to keep some of our stuff behind her desk as well, so that we could go down and eat breakfast once we gave our daughter over to the anesthesiologist to be able to take her back. So this is all pre-op stuff. And then now we're going to get into kind of the sort of post-op. So here's where the caution sign will go. And when I handed over my baby to the anesthesiologist, I cried as a release of, I was cool as a cucumber whenever I was talking about this with other people, about what was going to happen, about all of that. And we didn't tell a whole lot of people. We told our families, like my family and my husband's family, and then that was it. I think I might have told maybe one friend. I just didn't know how to say it. I didn't know what we needed. I didn't know what to expect. And I was holding all of this pent up tension and things. And so when I handed her over, yes, I was scared, but I also was able to finally acknowledge just how much, or like how stressful it was for me and for our family. I will be forever grateful to my husband as well. So I'll probably remove the caution marker at this point, but I will be forever grateful for my husband for his support during that time. And also, I mean, he's always supportive, but also when we were called back, so after breakfast, we went back up to the waiting area, and it wasn't long before the surgeon came and was like, yeah, we're pretty much done. I think the plastic surgeon came out first, and he was like, yeah, I'm done. The neurosurgeon will be out shortly. And sure enough, like a half hour later or something, the neurosurgeon came out and he was like, yep, we're done. She's in post-op and recovery, starting to wake up. When she wakes up, somebody will come get you. And 5 minutes later, somebody was like, okay, we're ready for you. Obviously, she was hungry and in a lot of pain. So she was like starting to cry and stuff. I think as I recall, when we went into the recovery area right at first, I believe a nurse had her, but like I mentioned before, I'll be forever grateful to my husband for allowing me to hold her first. It was just so good for my body's regulation. I was able to hold her and comfort her and all of that in the recovery area. And then we were taken to her post-op room, like her recovery room that we would be staying in for 2 nights. We stayed in the hospital for 3 days and 2 nights. So I stayed there for 2 nights. One thing I will mention as well is, obviously, since she had a breathing tube, when they pulled it out, they were like, oh, by the way, there was mucus that came out with that, so she's probably getting sick. I was like, fantastic. So she's going to be sick and recovering from surgery and probably in a ton of pain. So fantastic. That's fantastic. it's going to be a long night. And I was wrong. It was actually not that long of a night. Going into like the actual post-op hospital stay, it was not that bad. It was like, yeah, my milk supply dipped a little bit because I was stressed, but at the same time, I was probably better fed there than I had been prior to that because I didn't have to cook my food. I just had to ask my husband to go get it, or sometimes I would go get it myself. The nurses were really sweet in the wing that we were in. They were always like, okay, go get food. Like, we'll watch her, or like keep an eye on her, just leave the door open for the hospital room and things. And I was like, okay, that's good. So we did that a few times, just like for a half hour, go down, eat something, and like take a break from being in that same hospital room. Never again am I going to wait until the last minute to clear my storage. Holy cow, this has been crazy. All right, so where were we? Hospital room, that's what it was. I did forget to mention when we first got into the hospital room, we had to get her on her pain medicine regimen because she just had surgery. Of course, you want to make sure that they are not in pain. We gave her a prescribed opioid for the very beginning just to cut through the pain because she was inconsolable when she first got out of surgery, and with good reason. I mean, it's scary. She's in an unfamiliar place. There was unfamiliar things being done to her. She was having pain in places she wasn't used to having pain. There were all these things working against her. So we used that to cut through the pain, and then it was Tylenol and ibuprofen on rotation. And I let the nurses keep track of that, and I didn't have to even worry about it. I just was like signing off, or I would have to sign off on if it was okay to give it to them. And she took medicine so well. She did really well with the pain as well. It was just overall, we couldn't have asked for a better situation when it came to this kind of thing. And I am so grateful that things turned out as they did, and that she really didn't have too much of an issue. Her good pain management, or her good pain tolerance, I guess, ended up being a good thing as well for when we had the helmet. So moving on to helmet and other things moving forward section of this video. Also, by the way, if this video has been helpful or comforting to you in any way, make sure you give it a like and share it with friends that might have the same situation going on. I believe this will be helpful to you guys, and I know that it really helped me to talk with my daughter's surgeon and ask my questions and all of that. So it brought a lot of comfort to be able to talk to them, but as well, once it was done, was so much better as well. So hopefully sharing my experience will help you guys with all of that you might be going through. Helmet is the next situation. And like I mentioned before, the pediatrician was the one that kind of recommended or got the neurosurgeon's team like researching helmet people here, because they were unaware of people who did the kind of helmet that they were looking for, which was a post-op helmet with a top hinge, which I didn't realize it was closed, with a top hinge like this instead of a side hinge, which is like the normal, like just positional plagiocephaly issues. It's got a side hinge that closes on the side as well, instead of a top hinge and closing in the back. Like I just showed you, I can show it again in a second. In fact, I will. So they did some research. So instead of having to take my 21-month, almost 2-year-old daughter with me for like the whole day, I was able to just take her in the morning with my newly post-op baby to go do her helmet stuff. Instead of taking an hour and a half, it was a half hour or so. Like 35 minutes, I think, is how far it was away from us. And that was so helpful to me and my peace of mind as well. So I know that they liked to use a certain brand basically, but all the helmets are made the same. They are all shipped off to the same manufacturer to make the helmets. So it really didn't matter. And they knew that. They were just looking for somebody who knew what a post-op helmet was and what a hinge on the top was, which there's a specific word for it, a specific phrasing and stuff. And even though I was dealing with it for 9 months, or 10 months. I don't remember the exact phrasing that was used, but basically it just meant that it was a post-op helmet instead of a just head reshaping helmet. So here we go. Our situation with the helmet. So we found our guy, made an appointment. We had to wait until the swelling of her head went down, which was, they estimated about 10 days. Her head was probably a little bit swollen still when it was given because she hadn't been on pain meds and things, so it could have been a little bit swollen still. But anyway, because yes, by 10 days she was almost entirely off of it, I would give it to her right before bed, and that's it. I believe, as I recall, she just did so well with the pain. Anyway, we had to wait about 10 days for the swelling to go down so we could do the helmet measurements. And to do that, they have this special thing that like scans the child's head, or the baby's head, and it's basically like this nylon sock that goes over their head, except it doesn't have like a face thing, and it ties at the bottom. And then they put like these electromagnetic, maybe they're electromagnetic, I don't know, they put these special stickers that can be sensed by this technology, I guess, that allows them to measure different parts of the head. So they put like this big sticky on her soft spot, and then they put these little stickers on like her nose, her chin, her lip, and her ears. And that was so that the technology could tell where her head was and give an accurate measurement or make an accurate representation of her head how they wanted it to be, which is how they molded the helmet. Then we had to wait about 2 weeks for the helmet to come in. So they shipped off the specs, and then this manufacturer in, I think it's Florida, makes the helmet, and then they ship it back to whoever sends out the specs or the measurements, I guess you could say. Anyway, you get the helmet, and then you have to make sure that it fits right. So this one was her first helmet. She had two. This one was her first helmet, and she always needed like between the eyebrows shaved off a little bit, and it was also when we would add padding in, and so there was all of that going on. Then we had to come back a week later to make sure that everything was good after we had actually had it on her head for a longer period of time, because by the week she already would have had it on 23 hours a day. So they do ease you into wearing, or your kid into wearing the helmet. It starts an hour on, or 2 hours on, an hour off, I think. And then it was 4 hours on the next day and an hour off. And then it was 8 hours on and an hour off. And at that point, she was basically wearing it all day. And then it was 23 hours with an hour off each day. So, and that was when you cleaned the helmet too. You clean it with rubbing alcohol and then with whatever shampoo you were using on baby's head. And by the end, we were double shampooing our poor child's head because it stank to high heaven. It was really bad. The helmet and her head, both were really bad. It took us a couple weeks after the helmet was off for her head to not smell anymore. It was really, really bad. But it's a daily occurrence. You have to wash their hair every single day. After a week of wearing the helmet, they made some adjustments to like the shape of it, mostly so that it wouldn't dig into her face. And then they also had put like some padding in the back. Once she had the helmet, we went and saw her surgeon as well, just to make sure that the helmet was fitting right or how he wanted it to fit. And he was like, yeah, this is perfect. We'll probably send more people to this helmet guy because he does know what he's doing. So I am happy to have been of service to other moms and dads who are further north in the country, because this guy is closer than the closest clinic that they were trying to get us to go to. Every week, or every time you went to the helmet person, they would adjust the helmet to make sure that it still worked for the baby and that it was as comfortable as it can be, because it is a relatively hard plastic and it, of course, would not be super comfortable to be in. But as a baby, they always say that the babies never even realize it's there. I think that's false. They do realize it's there, they just don't care as much as like an adult would, because they don't have as much experience without the helmet as an adult would, or even a bigger kid. So there's that. After the first week with it, then they did, I think, 2 weeks, and then it was every 3 weeks we would go visit, and every time they would take measurements, circumference, angles of the head, width and length of the head as well. And they would do all these measurements and all of that. And I think about 6 months in, she needed a new helmet, which ended up being this one. Yes, this one. So they look pretty much the same. It's like really hard to tell the difference. This one is the first one, this one's the second one. And the only difference is like the ear holes and I think the like width of like how much was showing of like around her eyes. Yeah, that's really the only difference between the two helmets, other than it actually is bigger. Believe it or not, it's bigger. And yeah, when we got this helmet, we had to do like the sock measurement thing again. And by that time she was rolling around and crawling and it was not fun trying to keep her still for it. It was much easier to keep her still when she was younger. But still had the helmet, and that lasted for the last like 3 months that she had the helmet. And in December, we were able to get it off. We have been very lucky that the surgeon has been willing to do virtual appointments / phone calls with us as long as we send pictures of our child's head and the measurements that the helmet guy has been taking, so he can see the growth and see all of that. So that's what we've done. That's what we did in we sent pictures in December, and then we also sent pictures in January, at the end of January, and both times he gave us a call and was just like, yeah, everything looks good. You can have her have the helmet off at the beginning of December. And then it was, yeah, everything looks good. You can go ahead and keep the helmet off forever, hopefully. Ever. Actually, they wouldn't put a helmet on now because the kids' heads don't grow quite as much after the first like 6 to 9 months. So a helmet really wouldn't do all that much good anyway. When we sent pictures and he called us back at the end of January, our surgeon, he was like, okay, I want to see her when she's around 2. Then from what I remember, it would be about every year after that until they're about 5. With when she's about 2, he's expecting the same thing where we take pictures of her head, different angles and things, and get measurements from her helmet guy again. Just send all of those in and then we'll be good to go. I do think that the other ones will be in person because it'll be so long since he had seen her, and it's once a year instead of, every 3 months or whatever that we would be seeing him. So I really hope this video has been helpful. Normally I do motherhood and parenting content, which this is related, but normally I do more relatable like tips and tricks and like stuff like that on this channel. If you're interested in that, make sure you subscribe as well. We are building a community that supports all parents, regardless of opinions. We are trying to be uplifting and kind to each other while we are being supportive. And of course, because that's the only way to be supportive, is being uplifting and kind. I think I mentioned earlier in this video that I had made a video specifically about craniosynostosis. It was my very first video on this channel. I will link it right here. And if you are interested more in exactly what it is and doing like information research like that, that's a video that you should definitely watch. And my mom shared it with some of her family when they were asking questions about what exactly it was. I try to be pretty succinct. I think it's like 15 minutes or something, and this one is probably much longer. But yeah, I will see you in the next one.